I want you to imagine you're sitting in a bar in Austin, Texas. It's late, maybe past midnight. It's one of those places that feels like it's held together by layers of old cigarette smoke and floor wax. Outside, the Texas humidity is so thick that you can practically feel it sticking to your skin. But inside, it's just cool enough to be comfortable. And there's a man sitting across from his friend. His name is Jeff. Jeff is in his late 30s now. He's got a career, a life, a house, and he looks normal. But he's leaning over his drink and he's talking in a voice that's just a little too quiet for the room. He's telling a secret that he hasn't shared in 30 years. And he's talking about a Tuesday afternoon in 1985. See Jeff. He grew up in a house that was always bright. Big windows, lots of sun. It was the kind of house where you aren't supposed to be afraid of the dark because the dark never really had a place to hide. Jeff was 6 years old. He was in his bedroom playing with some toy cars on the rug. He remembers the sound of the lawnmower somewhere down the street. He remembers the smell of cut grass coming through the screen window. And then something in the room changed. It wasn't that the sun went behind the clouds. It was different. It was like someone had reached out and turned down the volume in the world. The lawnmower sound faded away. The bird sounds stopped. Jeff looked towards the corner of his room near the closet, and he saw a hole. That's how he described it. Not a shadow cast by the lamp or a trick of the light. It was a hole in the shape of a man, a very tall man. This figure was wearing a long, heavy overcoat, the kind of thing that someone would wear in an old black and white movie in a rainstorm. And on his head was a hat, a wide brimmed hat. Jeff sat there, 6 years old, frozen on his rug. He said the most terrifying part wasn't the figure itself. It was the fact that the figure seemed to be drinking the light. The wallpaper behind it was becoming dull. The rug was turning grey, almost like a black and white movie. The thing in the hat didn't move. It didn't have eyes, or at least Jeff couldn't see them. It was just void, an absence, holes where eyes are supposed to be. Jeff did what any reasonable 6-year-old would do. He bolted. He didn't look back. He ran downstairs to the kitchen where his parents were. His parents did the thing most parents would do. They went into his room, they opened the closet, they showed him that there was nothing there. They told him it was a waking dream. Jeff wanted to believe them, and for 30 years he almost did. Now back in the bar in Austin, Jeff is telling his friend the story and he's laughing a bit. The nervous, shaky laugh you give when you're trying to make a ghost story sound like a joke. He's telling his friend I spent half my life looking over my shoulder. Every time I see a man in a fedora on the street, my heart would jump into my throat. Every time I walked past a dark hallway, I would walk a little faster. His friend is nodding, listening. He thinks it's just a creepy kid story. But Jeff stops laughing. He says, "The thing is, I never felt like it went away. I felt like it was just waiting for me to acknowledge it again. Like it was a game of hide and seek that only one of us knew we were playing." Jeff describes the years in between, the college dorm rooms where he couldn't sleep unless the closet door was locked, the first apartment where he would wake up at 3 a.m., smelling something like wet copper, like old pennies, the feeling, static electricity in the air that made the hair on the back of his arm stand up. He never saw the figure fully, just glimpses, a brim of a hat disappearing around the corner, a heavy coat sleeve vanishing into a shadow. He thought he was losing his mind. He went to the doctors. They told him he was stressed. They told him about sleep paralysis. They gave him names for it too. But Jeff knew you don't smell wet copper in a dream. So he's sitting there in Austin finishing his drink. He feels better. He finally said it out loud. He told the secret. He's a grown man, and the monster from his childhood is just a story now. Closing time comes. Jeff and his friend stand up. They walk towards the back exit of the bar. It leads out to a small gravel car park behind the building. There's a screen door, the kind old mesh wire that rattles when you touch it. Jeff reaches for the handle. He looks through the mesh out onto the humid Texas night, and there's a single street lamp over the gravel. It's flickering, that rhythmic click, buzz sound of a dying bulb. And standing right under that light, leaning against the passenger side of Jeff's car, is the hat, the long coat, the void. 30 years had passed. Jeff had grown up. He'd moved cities. He's changed his whole life. But the man in the hat hadn't moved an inch. Jeff froze. His friend bumped into his back, asking what was wrong. But Jeff couldn't speak. His lungs felt like they'd been filled with cold lead. The street lamp flickered again, and in that split second of the light, the figure tilted its head. Now, in every other story you will hear tonight, and believe me, there are thousands of them, people say the Hat Man has no face. They say it's just a shadow. But Jeff saw it. Maybe it was because he waited 30 years. Maybe it was because he finally told the secret. Under the brim of that hat, Jeff didn't see eyes. He didn't see skin. What he did see was bone. A skull. yellowed, ancient, and polished like a stone in the river. And it was grinning, not a happy grin, but a got you grin. The kind of look a hunter gives when the trap finally snaps shut. Then the lamp flickered off. When the lamp came back on a second later, the gravel was empty. The car was there, but the hat man was gone. Jeff didn't go home that night. He drove until the sun came up. Before leaving, Jeff told that friend in the bar that when he looked at that skull, when he looked into those empty eye sockets, he didn't feel like he was looking at a ghost. He felt like he was looking at a mirror. Like the hat man wasn't there to hunt him. He was there to collect him. And Jeff is still waiting. He's in his 40s now. He lives in a house with no closets. And he usually keeps the lights on. Because he knows that 30 years is nothing to a man who has all the time in the world. My name is Annie, and this is just the beginning. Because if you think Jeff was alone, you haven't heard about what happened in Mexico or what the men in dresses were trying to hide from. That's where we're going next. It would be easier if it were just Jeff. If we could just point to one man in Austin and say he had a hard childhood or he had an overactive imagination, we could all sleep a little better tonight. But the Hat Man doesn't stay in Austin. He doesn't stay in the dark either. I want to take you back to 1984, a different place, a small town in Mexico. There was a young boy there. We'll call him Leo. Leo is about 10 years old. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun is high and brutal. You know, the kind of heat where the air seems to shimmer over the pavements. Leo walks into his house after school. The living room is dim compared to the glare outside, but it's far from dark. He's looking for his mother, but the house is quiet. He stops in the middle of the room because the air suddenly feels different. It's like the temperature plummeted 20 degrees in a single step. He can see his own breath misting in the air. Right there in the middle of a Mexican summer, and there's a smell. It's not the smell of cooking or dust, it's a smell of ozone, that sharp electrical scent you get right before a massive thunderstorm. Leo looks towards the hallway. A figure is walking across his living room. It's tall, it's wearing a coat, it's wearing a hat. But it isn't solid like the thing Jeff saw. Leo describes it as being made of gray smoke. You could see the family photos on the wall right through it. It didn't have feet. It was gliding. Leo watched, frozen, as the smoke man walked straight towards the far wall. It didn't slow down. It didn't turn. It just drifted into the plaster and dissolved. A week later, Leo is in the bed. It's nighttime. He wakes up because he feels someone is watching him. He looks at the bedroom window, and there, the Hat Man is standing outside. Just a silhouette against the moonlight, but this time he isn't made of smoke. He's solid. And where his eyes should be, there are 2 points of fire, a dull, burning red. He wasn't trying to get in. He wasn't tapping on the glass either. He was just there. Like he was checking to see if Leo was still there, if he was still on the list. Now, if you're a skeptic, you're thinking, kids, it's always kids. Their brains are sponges for ghost stories. So let's leave the children behind and let's go to North California. There is a place there called Copperopolis. It's rugged country, old, gold rush land with deep canyons and a soil that's seen a lot of blood over the last 150 years. A few years ago, a large-scale construction project was underway out there. We're talking about a crew of grown men who spend their days moving earth with heavy machinery. These aren't people who believe in these things. They believe in blueprints and diesel. But something started happening at the perimeter of the site. It started with one worker on a night shift. He was walking back to the supply shed, the smell of grease and dried dirt in his nose, the sound of the generators humming in the distance. He looked towards the tree line and saw a man standing there. He thought it was a trespasser. He shouted, but he didn't get a reply. He shone his heavy-duty flashlight towards the tree. The light hit that figure, and it just disappeared. Like the light absorbed the figure. The next night, 2 other workers saw him. They were standing by the trucks, and they described a void in the shape of a man with a wide hat. They said it was darker than the night around it, like someone had cut a hole in the scenery. This wasn't a glimpse. This lasted for a few minutes. It got so bad, and so many men were reporting the same thing, that the site supervisors had to do something they'd never wanted to do. They had put in a formal shift reports. Imagine being a site boss sitting in the trailer with a cup of lukewarm coffee, having to type out a report for the corporate office that explains why the night crew is refusing to work near the north perimeter. You can't write ghost on a corporate form, so they wrote unidentified intruder. But they also wrote down the details: tall, long coat, wide-brimmed hat, and does not respond to verbal commands, appears to absorb light. These men weren't dreaming. They weren't in bed. They were awake. They were together, and they were terrified. Because the Hat Man wasn't just a shadow in a bedroom anymore. He was a physical presence that was documented, not by ghost hunters, but by a construction company trying to keep its worker from quitting. Why was he there? Why that site? Some people say it's because Hat Man is drawn to places where the veil is thin, places where people are stressed or tired, or where the land has memory of its own. But I think it's simpler than that. I think he was just watching the work like a foreman from another world, making sure everything was being prepared. But prepared for what? To answer that, we have to look at what happens when the Hat Man stops watching and starts acting. We have to talk about the 117 men who never woke up. There is a point where a story stops being spooky and starts being a tragedy. For the Hat Man, that point is 1978. Now I want you to imagine a tiny, cramped apartment in a city like Chicago. It's the middle of the night. The air inside is thick with the smell of jasmine incense and a faint metallic scent of a radiator clicking in the corner. In the bedroom, a young man is sleeping. He's healthy. He's in his 20s. He's a refugee, a man who survived a war, survived the jungle, and finally made it to safety of America. But his mother is sitting in the chair by the door, and she isn't sleeping. She's holding a shard of cold iron in her hand, her knuckles white. She's watching the shadows in the corner, and she is terrified. See, in her culture, they have a name for this thing Jeff saw in Austin. They call it Deb Sog, a spirit that comes in the night, sits on your chest, and slowly, methodically squeezes the breath out of your body until your heart just stops. Between 1978 and 1988, over 100 of these men died in their sleep in America. No medical explanation, no survivors. But the families were desperate to save their sons, so they began practicing what I call spiritual camouflage. They would surround the bed with thick circles of salt. They will call their sons by different fake names, hoping the spirit wouldn't recognize who was lying in the bed. They would place knives under the pillows, believing that the iron could cut a shadow. They were trying to make their sons invisible to the dark. It didn't work. Whatever was coming for them, it didn't need a name to find them. It didn't care about the salt or the iron. 117 men were found exactly where they slept, their faces twisted in a mask of horror that the science still can't explain. A few years later, a filmmaker named Wes Craven sat in his office and read a newspaper clipping about the 117 men. He couldn't shake the image of someone being found dead because of something they saw in a dream. He took that fear, that specific primal terror, and he gave it a sweater, a clawed glove, a wide-brimmed hat, and he called it Freddy Krueger. A lot of people will tell you that's where the Hat Man came from. They will say, we only see him because we all watched The Nightmare on Elm Street, and our brains have gotten infected by the movie. But Wes Craven didn't invent the dub song. He didn't invent that thing that Jeff saw in 1985. Before the movie was even a hit, he didn't invent the Smoke Man in Mexico. He just gave a name to something that has been standing in our corners since we first learned how to build walls. So, what is he? If you look at all the stories, the construction workers in California, the boy in the living room, and the man in the bar, one thing stays the same. The hat man doesn't hunt, he doesn't growl, he doesn't even move most of the time. He just watches. I think he's a tally man. I think he's there to keep count. Every time you have a close call, a moment where you felt like you were standing on the edge of a cliff, or a night where you woke up gasping for air, he is there, tucking a notch into the brim of his hat. He isn't there to kill you. He's there to wait until it's time. And when that street lamp finally stops flickering and just stays dark, he'll stop watching and he'll step out of the corner and he will finally show you why he was waiting. Have you seen him? Maybe it wasn't the hat. Maybe it was just a shape in the hallway that shouldn't be there. I'm always looking for accounts like these, so if you have a story of your own, something you have seen that the science can't explain, I would love to hear it. If you would like to see your encounters featured here on the channel, tell me about it in the comments below or via the submission link in my description. We're building a community for people who know that the world is a little stranger than it looks. And I have a story of my own, something that happened in an apartment when I was a kid. It is one of the reasons why I'm so obsessed with these shadows. But I'm not ready to tell it just yet. But if we hit 500 subscribers, I'm going to share exactly what I saw in the kitchen window. So hit that subscribe button, help us get to 500 subscribers. And if you're still here, if you stayed for the whole story, leave a comment with the word Tallyman. It lets me know who stayed till the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious and maybe leave the lights on.